Okay, welcome back everyone. So we are resuming Hilchot Pesach, and we are in Siman Taf Mem Daled 444. We discussed, just remind everyone, we're 2 months away from Pesach, right? Today was Tu B'Shvat, which means that tomorrow night in 8 weeks' time is Pesach, and so especially this year with Erev Pesach falling on Shabbat. So this is actually our topic for this evening. Siman Taf Mem Daled deals with the laws of Erev Pesach which falls on Shabbat. So we've discussed in the previous chapters the Bedikat Chametz, the month of Nisan, what happens if you have Chametz deposited with a non-Jew, and so on, if you've taken responsibility, etc. And now we are dealing with the laws of Erev Pesach which falls on Shabbat. We saw last week Seif Aleph. In Seif Aleph we discussed the mitzvah of Bedikat Chametz on Erev Pesach, and that you do it on Thursday night. We talked about what you do for food during the course of Shabbat, because obviously you've got an issue with Shabbat afternoon, you can't have Chametz, you can't have matzah, and we said the best eitzah, the best advice is that a person uses matzah mevushelet or matzah metugenet, which means either fried or boiled matzah. Once it's already been baked matzah, you then boil it, and then you can use that for all three seudot, Friday night, Shabbat morning, and Shabbat afternoon, and you can have seudah shelishit. So that's what we discussed, the main things which we discussed last week, and also matzah ashira. Okay, now we turn to Seif Bet. Let's go to Seif Bet. Taf Mem Daled, Seif Bet. Let's quickly, just for the completion of the whole chapter, let's quickly do Seif Aleph once more. So, Siman Taf Mem Daled Din Erev Pesach Shechalet B'Shabbat. Seif Aleph, Yedalet Shechalet B'Shabbat, when Erev Pesach falls on Shabbat, Botkin Lel Yud Gimel Mvarim HaKol Lifnei Shabbat. We search the house on Thursday night, and we get rid of all the Chametz before Shabbat. Shayrin Mazon Shtei Sodot Tzorach Shabbat, and we leave enough food for 2 meals. The Seudah Shelishit Zmana Ahar HaMincha, because Sudah is after Mincha, you can't do the Sudah Shelishit with either matzah, because Erev Pesach is forbidden, and not with Chametz because after the time. Ela b'matzah ashira, the Shulchan Aruch gives the option of using matzah ashira. We discussed that. What is important is that it's done, whatever you're using, whether you're using matzah ashira or matzah mevushelet, or even if you're not actually using any matzah, but you're just having fruit or you're just having meat, in all circumstances one needs to try to do this before the 10th hour. That means 2 hours before the end of the day. The reason being is that with the halacha, specifically with Pesach night, that a person does not eat something substantial before at least from 2 hours. Why? So that he eats the matzah lete'avon with with appetite. And so this is why from 2 hours before, whatever you're doing for Sudah Shelishit, one should do it before, whether using matzah, ashira, or boiled matzah, or fruit and meat, you do that before the 10th hour. And this is why, generally speaking, the practice is in many places, you pray mincha either early, and then you do Sudah Shelishit, or you do Sudah Shelishit before Mincha, and then you come to synagogue towards the evening and do Mincha, and then go on to Arvit of Pesach. Okay, good. Seif Bet. This is where we left off last week. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Tov leva'er be'erev Shabbat kodem hatzot. It's a good custom to dispose of Chametz on Friday, kedei shelo yavo lit'ot b'shar shanim leva'er achar hatzot, in order that other years you continue to do it at the right time. Which means as follows. Remember, we learned, you may recall this, we learned this in Bedikat Chametz. Let's, quick reminder, who remembers? What did we say? When is the main time a person needs to do the bitul? When's the main time a person needs to do bitul? Is it in the night after Bedikat Chametz? Is it during the day? What did we learn in previous chapters? Anyone remember? We do it, nowadays we do both, but when is the Talmudically, halachically required time to do bitul Chametz? In the night, we said. In the night, right? We said, yeah, good. In the night. So because that's the main time. After Bedikat Chametz, then we do the bitul, we nullify everything, and then the next day it's customary, we do it as well before the time, we do another bitul, we say kal hamira again. But really, it's enough to do kal hamira at night, and then you eat whatever chametz you have left over, and in the morning you just dispose of any remaining chametz in the ways which we're going to learn tonight, how you dispose of chametz. We'll see that tonight, B'ezrat Hashem. How indeed we dispose of chametz. So now think about it. Erev Pesach falls on Friday, on Shabbat. So on Thursday night we're doing Bedikat Chametz, which means on Thursday night after Bedikat Chametz we're doing the Bitur Kal Hamira Deika Birshuti. Now, on a regular year in the morning we would do two things. We would do a Bitur Chametz, and then we would go and dispose. We would dispose of the Chametz and do a Bitur Chametz. We would do two things on a regular year, both a Bitur and a Biur. Now let's work this through. Is there any value, firstly, of doing bitul chametz on Friday morning? Is there any value doing bitul chametz on Friday morning?
But you might, that, in case you forget on Saturday morning.
So you've already done that on Thursday night, and you've left.
Oh no, you're still eating chametz. Don't forget it.
You've left food over. There's no value of doing bitul chametz on Friday morning, because remember we learned the main time to do bitul chametz is on Thursday night. So you've done that. Now bitul chametz on Friday has no purpose, because you said on Thursday night I'm nullifying all chametz aside from the chametz I want to keep during the course of Shabbat. So what are you doing on Friday morning now? You still have the meals of Shabbat. So there's no point doing that. Bi'ur chametz, disposing of chametz, strictly speaking, there's no need to do it on Friday, because you're going to do the bi'ur on Shabbat morning after the time you finished eating, before the time comes where it's forbidden to own anymore. So then you're going to do the bi'ur, the disposal. Remember, always differentiate between the bitur, which is the nullification, that's the I'm giving up, kal hamira de ka birshuti, that's the bitur, and the bi'ur, which is the act of disposal, which we hold is just throwing out in a place where it's going to be carried away. So there's no point doing bitul, a nullification, a verbal nullification, or a heart nullification. There's no point doing that on Friday morning, because you still want to keep some chametz till Shabbat morning. Now bi'ur as well, really meikara, then you do not need to do bi'ur, disposal of chametz, because you're going to do it on Shabbat morning. Nonetheless, here the Shulchan Aruch is ruling from the Ashkenazi Rishonim, and it's important to note this. From the Ashkenazi Rishonim, he quotes that it's a good thing to do bi'ur chametz, the disposal of chametz, on Friday. Why? Not because there's any intrinsic value to it, but just because so that in other years, when we do the bi'ur chametz, we do it at the right time. Because really, you can do bi'ur chametz any time on Friday. Think about it. I could do bi'ur chametz on Friday afternoon. If I've got loads of chametz left over from Thursday night bedika, really, there's nothing to preclude me from doing bi'ur, the disposal of burning or throwing it away down the toilet. I can do that on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I can burn before Shabbat, and it's not the time of the 14th. And any remaining chametz which I want for the Shabbat, I'll keep aside. But everything else, I'll burn at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Really, you can do that if you wish to. You can do that. But it's a good thing, they say, to do so, tov leva'er, it's good to do so at the normal time. If it was a normal year, you would have the fixed time, 5 hours before, after the up to the end of the 5th hour, wherever the regular time is, we learned 1 hour before Chatzot, to do it at the same time, so that you do that in other years as well. Right? So, if you forgot, let's say you have a lot of chametz left over. On Thursday night you did bidikat chametz, you have lots of chametz left over, you need to go and get rid of it. You got a bit of food left over for Shabbat, you've got extra food which you know you're not going to need over the course of Shabbat. And you forgot to do bi'ur chametz to get rid of it. And you look at your watch, it's now 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's fine. Still go and do bi'ur chametz, dispose of it as you normally do. And even though it's in the afternoon, that's absolutely fine, because it's before the 14th, before the 6th hour. So that's no problem. Nonetheless, it's a recommendation that you do it at the time, which is why you'll find in the calendars this year, they'll say, it's good to dispose of the chametz at whatever the time is, 11 o'clock or something, an hour before Chatzot, it's a good thing to do. But the point is that really, mi'ikar hadin, you can do bi'ur, dispose of chametz, the whole Friday. Theoretically, you can do bi'ur chametz on Friday night and Shabbat morning as well. Just that some instances of bi'ur chametz involve a melacha. So that's why generally we do the bi'ur before Shabbat. But again, if you are really stuck for time and you could do bi'ur even on Friday night or Shabbat morning in the correct ways, which don't involve the melacha of Shabbat, you could do it like that. But still, the recommendation is we do bi'ur at the time where we would do it on a normal year, which is before the 6th, at 1 hour before Chatzot. Bitul, however, nullification, there's no purpose of doing it any time on Friday, and therefore we don't do any bitul on Friday. So we only do bitul on Thursday night and on Shabbat day when we finish the meal at the right time. So what happens is basically Thursday night bedikat chametz. After bedikat chametz, we do the bitul. We say kal hamira, which I don't know about. I'm nullifying. Remember, on the night version, we just say which I don't know about, because the bit which you know about, you want to keep. On Friday, you dispose of any chametz, preferably by an hour before Chatzot. You dispose of any chametz you will not be using over the course of Shabbat. On Shabbat morning, you finish your meal, you dispose of chametz in the ways we're going to learn now, and then you do the bitul again. So there's a bitul on Thursday night, a potential bi'ur on Friday anytime, although recommended before Chatzot, and then again a bitul and a bi'ur on Shabbat morning at the right time. Yes, Robert?
Just one simple question. There is no, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is there's no specific mitzvah to do bi'ur. In other words, if even on a normal year, the amount of chametz that was left over was just enough for everyone to have breakfast, you don't have to go and buy some chametz to burn it.
So that's a very, very good question.
And similarly, the same question applies in this instance. We ate everything. There's only just enough for Shabbat. So do I have to go and acquire some so I can burn it, or so I can...
So very interesting. So the answer to the question is, very good question. The answer to the question is that there is a mitzvah of bi'ur chametz. Most certainly there is a mitzvah. Ach bayom harishon tashbitu se'or mibatechem. On Erev Pesach, bayom harishon means the day of the Korban Pesach. You must dispose of chametz from your houses. Mitzvah of bi'ur is mitzvah of the Torah. We're going to see this very clearly. 1 second, let me finish. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So you have the mitzvah of bi'ur chametz from 30 days before Pesach. Any time from 30 days before Pesach. Now, and which is why the poskim prefer that if you're giving your stuff away to a non-Jew, that's not called bi'ur. That's not disposal of. So therefore they say, if you want to give your fruit to a non-Jew, that's fine. But leave a bit where you can do the mitzvah of bi'ur with. Now, the next question is eating a form of bi'ur? Some of the poskim hold, the Minhat Chinuch famously held this, and he held as well, this is why from 30 days before Pesach he held, that every time you have breakfast, every time you have chametz, 30 days before Pesach, have in mind I'm doing the mitzvah of bi'ur chametz. Okay, I think that's a bit far-fetched, because it's not your intention to dispose of the house of chametz, just eating now. But according to some poskim, you can do bi'ur chametz by eating, and so according to that, but still we would advise, because it's not simple that you can do bi'ur chametz by eating. It could be that you have to actually do an act of disposal, of destroying, of destruction. That's what leva'er means, to destroy, and not eating. And therefore, it's always advised in lechatechila to leave aside a bit of chametz, which at least a kezait of chametz to do the bi'ur with. But thank you for that. Okay.
So hold on, but hang on. But then does that mean when it falls on Shabbat that we shouldn't? Because the time for doing the Bi'ur Chamei, are you saying the time is any time 30 days before? So it doesn't have to be done Dafka Erev Pesach.
Correct. Correct. That's agreed by everyone.
Do it Friday morning or Friday
Correct.
afternoon.
That's for sure.
But you understand the mitzvah, right? Okay, that's what I'm trying to understand. You don't have to Dafka do it on Shabbat.
Correct. Which is why, as we're saying, do it on Friday morning rather than Friday afternoon or so. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Hazak. Siv Gimel. This is an interesting halacha, and this is very much, I believe, dependent upon the times which we live in. So let's see what the halakha is. Says the Shulchan Aruch, En mevashtin leshabbat zeh daisa v'chayotze bazeh, don't make dishes for this Shabbat which are going to stick to the pot, like porridge, or other bread which is stuck to the pot. Why? Not because there's an issue with you're not going to clean it out properly. You'll clean it out properly, but the issue is the issue you're not meant to wash on Shabbat because of hachana. It's recorded in Shulchan Aruch, this is in Hilchot Shabbat, that you're not meant to wash dishes on Shabbat. Now, many poskim write nowadays, because of the heightened sensitivity we have to cleanliness and hygiene and these kinds of things. For most, again, this is very much dependent upon a person's, how they normally live during the rest of the week. But in many houses, people feel uncomfortable being in a kitchen in which there are dirty dishes in the sink. And so therefore, they write that nowadays you're allowed to wash your dishes on Shabbat, or at the very least put them in the dishwasher. Because that's not called hachana, it's not called preparation. I'm not doing it to prepare it so I won't have to wash my dishes on Sunday. I'm doing it because this for me now is Onyx Shabbat. This for me now is part of my enjoyment of living in my house, is I have a clean kitchen. That's the way I live the whole week round. If you're a kind of person who allows the dishes to stack up during the week in the sink and every couple of days you wash them, then true. You're not allowed to wash your dishes on Shabbat. Because that's preparation. Why are you doing it on Saturday? Wait till Sunday to do it. You're doing it because you're preparing, you're trying to save time, activities which you could do during the week, you want to do on Shabbat to take away from time Shabbat. So that's hachana, that's preparation. Now, as I said, nowadays we're living in a very we're very clean, heightened sensitivity, cleanliness and these things. So therefore many would say nowadays, for me, I want to have my sink clean. And if that's your attitude the rest of the week, then you're entirely justified to wash your dishes on Shabbat. But that wasn't the norm in those days. You leave dirty dishes and you wash them every so often. Remember, they didn't have hot water all the time. They didn't have the ability to wash all the time. They didn't have water all the time in some places. This is why washing is an activity which was forbidden on Shabbat. And therefore the Shulchan Aruch writes, don't cook dishes before Shabbat, but you're going to have to wash on Shabbat. Because why enter the prohibition of washing on Shabbat when you can cook other foods? And the Rama adds, and he says, if indeed you did do so, and there is stuff, then of course you can wash, because at the end of the day it's not called preparation, because you're doing it to get rid of the Chametz in advance of Pesach. But in the first instance, don't leave foods where you're going to have to wash. Now this, as I said, this is only practical and applicable if a person normally does not wash dishes on Shabbat, because they they're happy to have a sink with dishes. And if that's the case, don't leave Chametz, don't cook foods which you're going to have to scrub on Pesach. If you did do so, you can still scrub on Pesach, on Shabbat, to get rid of the Chametz in advance of Pesach. But if generally speaking you wash dishes on Shabbat, and it depends on the person. Often people ask me, can they put their dishes in the dishwasher? Is that called hachana, preparation for putting the dishwasher on after Shabbat? And the answer is the same. If you do this during the week, meaning you don't like to leave things lying around on the top in the kitchen and you immediately put dirty dishes in the dishwasher, then of course you can do that on Shabbat, because that's not called preparation. That's just the simple way you do things the entire week round. You want to keep things there. If, however, you allow them to stack up and every so often put them in the dishwasher, then it would be preparation to put it in the dishwasher on Shabbat. Good. Okay. Halacha Dalet. Achar she'achal b'Shabbat zeh sudat shachrit. You finished your meal in the morning, before the time where you're not allowed to eat. So that's 2 hours before Chatzot, the end of the 4th hour. Okay, firstly, he just says, you shake off any crumbs. Okay, this is just a side point, a quick musar for those people who get very stressed, very hectic and anxious. And people forget. How many times have we seen homes where people shouting at each other about this crumb of chametz or that crumb of chametz, and violating prohibitions of ona'at devarim, of being rude to other people, of chaos, of anger, and so on and so forth. What for? For some crumbs, which, as we've learnt over and over again, is not a problem. Less than that, no problem, crumbs. And the Shulchan Aruch says Just shake it off onto the floor. So you've had your challah, you've had your bread and their crumbs. Shake it off onto the floor. And the Mishnah Berurah endorses this. And he says, there's crumbs. He says, so what? These crumbs over the course of Pesach will become trampled upon and it's fine. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, now we're very cautious and we like to put it all together and pour it down the toilet and down the sink and so on. Fine. Okay, you want to do that, great. But recognize, meikar adin, if there's crumbs on the floor, it's fine. Yes, there's added problems. If there's kids or babies around who are going to crawl on the floor and then they're going to come and put it on the table, so on. Okay, you have to, my point is just to recognize that meikar adin we're seeing in the Shulchan Aruch, it's sufficient. If you have tiny crumbs left over from your bread on Shabbat morning, you can just push that onto the floor. Next, and the remaining dishes, which you have, the Chametz dishes, put them away, stack them away to where you're going to keep all your Chametz dishes. Okay, so that's straightforward, that's clear. But what happens now if you have leftover bread? I've got a big family, and I bought more bread than expected. People didn't end up eating. People weren't feeling whatever, maybe. I've got lots of bread left over. What am I going to do with that leftover bread? It's Shabbat morning. I can't burn it. So what can I do with it? So says the Shulchan Aruch a few options. Number one is, יכול לתנו לאינו יהודי על מנת שלא לצאת בו לרשות הרבים דרך הערמה ודבר מועט. Let me just say one thing before that. I have to say this now. We're going to learn in the next chapter, hopefully tonight, we should do it tonight, that the way the Shulchan Aruch holds that the mitzvah of bi'ur, of disposal works, is either you can burn or you can crumble it and disperse it into the air so it gets blown away by the wind. That's the second option. Or the third option is you throw it into the sea. The Rama for the Ashkenazim says they burn it, and this is why the Ashkenazim will always try to burn. But for Sfaradim, each of these three are good enough. You can just go out to your front door, outside of your front garden, of course. Take your challah, on a weekday, take your bread, and then dispose it. Break into small bits and put it out on the floor, and that's absolutely fine. That's called bi'ur. Or if you live next to a sea or next to a lake, go and put it in the lake. On Shabbat, you can't do these things. On Shabbat, you can't burn, you can't take it out of your domain and dispose of it into the air, and you can't take it to the sea. So how are you going to do bi'ur, how are you going to do disposal on Shabbat morning? That's the problem. So what does he say? He says what you can do is you can ask a non-Jew. Ask a non-Jew to come and take it. Now, the thing is, you can't instruct a non-Jew to take it out of your house, because this will be instructing him to do an Isur D'Oraita. Now remember, we've learnt these principles before. You're allowed to ask a non-Jew, instruct them to do something which is forbidden on Shabbat rabbinically for the purposes of a mitzvah. But you cannot ask a non-Jew to do something forbidden by the Torah for the purposes of a mitzvah. So I cannot instruct a non-Jew to carry for me in a place which is a Reshut HaRabim, in a public domain, because that is an Isur D'Oraita. So I'm instructing a non-Jew to do something forbidden by the Torah. So I can't do that. What I can do though is, I can tell him, here's Chametz, and do what you want with it. And if he decides to take it out, that's fine. Understood? However, you cannot do an action which will be inherently implied that I'm instructing you to take it out. Meaning, if I have loads of food, loads of Chametz left over, and I call my next door neighbor and say, hey, it's a lot of Chametz here. I can't eat this all now. The only way I can have benefit from this is if I take it home. So that's considered inherently instructing them to take it out. Only if you give them davar mu'at, a small amount. What's a small amount? One meal, which they can eat now. Theoretically, they could eat it now. So but if I give them a huge amount, if I give them 3-4 loaves of bread, and I tell them, you can have this, that doesn't work. Because that means you are implicitly instructing them to take it home, and that's instructing them to do an Isur D'Oraita. So, that can't be done. What can be done is that you tell them, I've got Chametz, and different small amounts. And if they decide to take each small amount by themselves, then they can do that. But to actually instruct them all, to give them in one go a huge amount and say, this is chametz for you, that doesn't work because you're instructing them to do nisur d'oraita. Okay, the poskim do right if you're really stuck. You're really stuck. What do you think? If you're really stuck, what have we learned? Remember, we learned this when we did the laws of carrying in Shin Aleph in 301 in Hilchot Shabbat. That many poskim hold that nowadays we don't really have Reshut Harabim d'oraita. Our normal streets, normal regular streets in London, not talking about central London, but right. So those kinds of streets, many would argue, is not a Reshut Harabim, and therefore it's only a Carmelit, which would mean that I can instruct the non-Jew to take it out even a lot, because that's going to be, I'm asking him to do something forbidden rabbinic, carrying in the Carmelit for the purposes of mitzvah, of me getting rid of my chametz. So, yeah, if you're really stuck, perhaps you could rely on that. However, what happens where you have a whole room of chametz? Whatever happened, let's say you woke up on Shabbat morning, you've done your mechirat chametz, and you forgot you have a whole garage in the back of your garden full of whiskies, full of chametz. They can't, practically go and take that all out now. They can't carry that home. It's Shabbat morning now. I can't burn. I can't throw it to the sea. I can't disperse it onto the streets. So what am I going to do with that? And there's not enough time, there's not enough capability for him to take out all the contents of my stuff in the garage and take it home. What can I do? So what's the option? What could you do in such an option? The only option is that you grant it to him in the correct way as a gift. So it stays in my garage, stays in my back garden, wherever, or in the room in the house where I've totally forgot. But it belongs to him. It's a matana gemura. It's a complete gift. And you would do a kinyan. Either lifting it up or handing over the key of the room. That's all a kinyan, a legal acquisition to show that you now have authority over it. You can't just be mafkirit. You cannot just give up ownership over it because it's in your possession. So I can't just say because it's in your possession. So you're going to have to give it as a gift to the goy. We have a halakha that you're not allowed to give gifts on Shabbat. You can't give gifts on Shabbat when there's no mitzvah involved. Here there's a mitzvah involved, and therefore it's permissible. So that would be your option. You're going to have to, in a case where the goy can't come and take it out of your house, it's so much, and then you would have to give it to him as a gift, and it belongs to him. And even though it's a gift on Shabbat, it's permissible for mitzvah. Some poskim, we don't hold this, but I just want to point this out. Some poskim do hold, if you're concerned, if let's say it's expensive, you've got a few £1,000s in the back, you should have thought about this, but you forgot, a few £1,000s in the back. And just to give to him as a gift, he may not give it back to you. It's his gift. It has to belong to him. And he can come and take it whenever he wants, and he can keep it. So you're concerned about that potential huge loss of money. Some of the poskim allowed you to sell it on Shabbat. Now we have a halacha. Mekah or mimkar, business, which means buying and selling, is forbidden to do on Shabbat. You cannot buy and sell on Shabbat, even for a mitzvah. You cannot buy and sell on Shabbat even for a mitzvah. Let's say someone's selling a really beautiful Sefer Torah, or a really beautiful book. And you agree on Shabbat. Say, I'm buying this from you now, £50, and you give me the book, and I'll give you £50 after Shabbat. You can't do that. It's a sword, even for mitzvah. So what's the reasoning here? They say here it's not mekah or minkar, it's not business. Because it's being done to absolve me of the prohibition of chametz, that's not called business. And therefore it's permissible. Okay, the halakha, it's stretched that, we don't hold that. And therefore, in practice, we will tell you, if that did happen on Shabbat morning, you would have to actually give the whole contents of the room to the non-Jew and belong to him as a matana gemura. Obviously, be prepared and set it before Shabbat. But if you were stuck, then that would be the option you would have to do. Okay.
Last question?
Yes.
Isn't the prohibition of doing business a rabbinic one?
Correct. You can't do, you can't violate rabbinic prohibitions on Shabbat for mitzvah.
Right. Okay, you can ask the goy to do it, but you can't yourself.
You're actively engaged in business on Shabbat.
you can't ask another goy to effect the sale on your behalf to the third goy, and then, do you see what I'm trying to say? You ask Mr. Smith to smell Chametz on your behalf to Mr. Jones, so he's doing the sale, and you're instructing him for a mitzvah. So I just wondered if that was you sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card for you.
On what authority is he doing the sale for you?
Well, you've granted him power of attorney.
Yeah.
You've verbally granted him your power of attorney. So I don't know, maybe that's a problem.
En shlichut legoy, it would have to be a legal thing, not a halachic thing, because a goy cannot act as an emissary. So it would have to. If I legally sold my house, can you legally transfer to the right to the goy on Shabbat to have authority over the chametz in your house? How would you do that?
Right, you. I don't know if in English law you need a contract or not, because you can't sign a contract.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
But I mean, when I ask people to do me a favour, will you sell this on eBay for me? I don't draw up a contract.
Correct, because that's not a proper, theoretically you could come and take it back anytime. It's not right. Okay, something interesting to think about. Yeah. Good. So those are your options. Oh, have you frozen again?
Recording in progress.
In your house, and then telling them if the whole thing's a present, because in both cases you're giving them a present. So I'll ask the Diane maybe when he's back.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm really sorry, but there seems to be some kind of connection issue around the house. But okay, fine. Hopefully,
I had a second question, if you don't mind. I'm not sure I understood the difference between inviting someone to come and have a meal's worth of chametz in your house, inviting a non-Jew, inviting him to say, here you go, have that contents of my garage. In both cases, you're just giving him a gift. So what's the difference? You're giving a gift of a small chametz you can just consume then and there.
We're talking about when you're not able to. It's too much to carry it out. It's not viable.
It's the same thing. In both cases, you're giving him a gift. What's the difference? What's the difference? In one case, it's a gift he can carry out. In another case, it's a gift he can't carry out afterwards.
No, because one is a gift where I'm just giving you a gift in which you can eat it now, and then you decide to go and take it out, and that's fine. He's taking it out. By him taking it out, you don't have to do a full kinyan because he's taking it out. It's in out of possession. But here it's in your possession. This is the problem. So you have to do a proper full kinyan. It's in your house. The only way it's going to belong to the non-Jew in your house is if you do a proper kinyan. He lifts it all up, but there's too much there, so you have to give him the key, something like that, a proper kinyan.
So he has to do the proper kinyan. That's the difference.
Yes, you're going to have, for sure, correct. As opposed to if I give you a loaf of bread, you take it out and eat it, and that's it. That's done. That's the whole thing.
But I mean, in effect, that is the kinyan. The fact you walk out with it.
Yeah, true. In a chana, but fine. As opposed to fine. Okay.
And just out of curiosity, if you just sort of stand in the street and announce, I've got lots of free food, come and help yourself, eat as much as you like, and people came and took some, you wouldn't.
Correct.
That's also.
That could also, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. So now, let's say next option is you don't have a non-Jew. You don't have a non-Jew. You're living in a place of all Jews, no non-Jews around, and you made more chametz than you expected. You can't take it out of your possession because you don't have an eruv. Remember, if you had an eruv, fine, take out the chametz. Crush it into small pieces and spread it out into the public domain. That's fine. Spread it out to the comments. Yeah. Okay, but if you have you can't do that, and you don't have a non-Jew, so what are you going to do now? How are you going to do bi'ur chametz? So what does Shulchan Aruch write? Look at Sif Hey. Im nish'ar chametz ahar she'achlu. If you still have chametz left over, mevatlo ve'kofeh alav kli ad motzi yom tov u'mevaro. Then all you do is you put a vessel, you put a utensil, you put some kli over it. So that you got bread in your house, belonging to you. But you do bitul. Bitul is nullification. You can do it on Shabbat. So I nullify, do bitul, so it no longer belongs to you. But it's in my house. And it's hefker in my house. So I cover it over, I'm giving up authority over it. And then I will do the bi'ur, I'll do the bi'ur after Pesach, after Shabbat, after Chag. Okay, so this is quite striking. You're going to have chametz in your house, and the thing is, you've done bitul, you've nullified, you've made it hefker to an extent, although it's in your house. But by covering it over, then you're going to make sure you don't eat it, you don't come to want to take ownership over it, and then you're going to burn it and get rid of it after the correct time. Now, the Mishnah Berurah adds in, obviously didn't have this in earlier times. He says you can throw it to the toilet. And this is generally what we do nowadays. So, if you have an eruv and you use the eruv, fine. Take it out to outside of your front garden. Whatever is remaining, you crush it into small pieces and put it out. Take it to the lake in the garden, put it in there, not in the garden, in the park, put it there. Yeah, that's all fine. You can't just leave chametz. You have to do some kind of destruction, act of destruction. An act of destruction is burning, throwing it into water, or crushing it up and then leaving it to the elements of the wind. So you can't just on Shabbat morning, even if you have an eruv, take out your remaining challah, you got a whole challah left over, and go and leave it on the street outside. That's not good enough. That's not called the mitzvah of bi'ur. You wouldn't be violating anything d'oraita because at the end of the day you made it hefker. But that's not the mitzvah of bi'ur. The mitzvah of bi'ur is to do an act of destruction. So what you get? So that's if you have an eruv. If you take it out, you can crush it and leave it on the street. Fine. But if you don't have an eruv, then what can you do? So we said you cover it over. So nowadays we have a toilet, something like that, so that you can flush it down the toilet. I know it feels very uncomfortable doing something like that. Of course, it's food, but it's chametz, and you have to get rid of it. Or alternatively, you can make it completely inedible for a dog. Even remember, chametz has to be inedible for a dog, and that you spray on it some very strong chemicals, and then you can put it in your bin in your house. You can put it in your bin out. That's fine because it's no longer called chametz because it's inedible for the consumption of a dog. And so that is the options which we have nowadays. So in practice nowadays, we're going to be talking about a situation where you made enough chametz where there's so much left over. There's no non-Jew. One second. There's no non-Jew. There's no ability to do any bi'ur chametz. So then you would cover it up with a kli and burn it after. In practice, you're going to find this situation. Either you don't have enough chametz, or there's a goy, or you can flush it down the toilet, or make it completely inedible by pouring something on it. Yes?
What can you rely on Michrat Chametz? Once he finishes eating any left Chametz, is not his. It's been sold to the goy the day before.
No, anything which has been sold to the goy in the Mechirat Chametz is put aside before Shabbat. That's put aside. We put that all aside, really, right? And you're right. Sorry, repeat your question. What was your question?
The Mechirat Chametz can apply also on Shabbat. Once he's done it on Friday, that on so hour, all the Chametz is there in my house, goes to the goy. So I sold it. So.
You mean you put your remaining chametz in the cupboard where you're selling the chametz?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could do that as well. Although, as we will learn when we get to it, selling real chametz is fine. It's debatable. It's certainly debatable.
Rabbi, can I just challenge that, because the sale is hard on Friday morning. You can't sort of then add to what when you're selling the stuff to the goy, you're going to sell it. You can't sell it to him on Shabbat. The rabbis who organize.
No, you're selling it on Friday, but it's chal on Shabbat morning. It's chal. The kinyan is chal on Shabbat morning. Like any mechira you can do before Shabbat, and it can be chal on Saturday morning. There's nothing wrong with that.
So I can sell my house for the completion day of Shabbat, and there's no halakhic problem with that.
No, of course, if you're moving in and out, there's going to be a problem with other things. But in terms of the actual business transaction, of course, and it's done before Shabbat. Why? Nothing to preclude you from it being chal on Shabbat. Of course not.
Okay.
So theoretically, you can add in chametz to the cupboard. But yeah, you're right. That would be if you've done mechirat chametz. You're 100% right. Thank you. If you've done mechirat chametz, theoretically, you could add it in to the. You could add it in after.
And presumably, all these caterers who do these events, they're always going to have tons of chametz left over, because they need to have chametz for Friday night, Shabbat morning, right? So is that what they do? The mechiras chal, and they just pack it all away, and
maybe
they're not over on.
Maybe, yeah.
And by the way, one more thing which surprisingly Shulchan Aruch didn't suggest is you talked about crumbling it in Rishos HaRabim, but we learned 10-15 minutes ago, you can crumble it onto your own floor. Even the Ramah says that's okay.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, there's a difference.
So why can't I?
There's a difference between a few crumbs, and taking a whole loaf of bread and crumbling into bits. Obviously, that's different. Yeah, we're not going to allow you to crumble a whole loaf of bread on your floor.
If I crumbled it into my garden, but then I suppose I'd be feeding the birds on Shabbat, which is another problem, right? The birds would all come and eat it.
Yeah, but you're not intentionally doing it that. Yeah, that would be possible potentially. Again, it depends on the quantity, and yeah, potentially that's an option. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Next, halacha vav. So we've talked about how you get rid of the chametz. Now continues the Shulchan Aruch. Even if you finished all your chametz, you ate it all up, still we do a bitul chametz. We still say kal hamira. So even if I made exactly the right amount of chametz and I consumed it on Friday night and on Shabbat morning, and I come at the right time, and all the chametz is gone. So you could say, what's the point of me saying kal hamira? I said kal hamira on Thursday night. I disposed of the chametz on Friday. Any remaining chametz I ate up. We still say kal hamira, just in case you forgot, just in case there is still chametz from Thursday night till today, which is still remaining in your house. Okay. Next halacha we'll do quickly. It's not so practical, but there is a point here. Says the Shulchan Aruch Sif Zayin. Ha'olech b'yom yudaled dvar mitzvah. So, you are traveling on Erev Pesach for a mitzvah purpose. Kigon amulet beno, to do a brit milah, or lechol sudat erusim bet hamiv, or you're going for an engagement party. V'niskar shesh lo chametz bebeto. And you remembered that you have left chametz in your house. So what am I going to do now? Do I have to go back and miss out on this mitzvah? And go and dispose of the chametz? Or can I just do bitul, just nullification, and do bi'ur at a later time during Pesach? Says the Shulchan Aruch, Im yachol lahzor leveto ulva'er ve'lahzor lemitzvoteh hazor v'va'er. If it's possible for you to have enough time to go back, dispose, and then still perform the mitzvah at the right time, you should do that. Ve'im lav, if you're not able to do that, yivatlenu belibo. You can just do bitul in your heart. Why? Because there's a mitzvah here which you are about to be engaged in. And as we've said many times, midoraita bitul suffices. And therefore, if the result of me doing the rabbinic, the other thing of biur is going to now make me lose out on the mitzvah, I am able to skip the biur and just do the bitul, just do the nullification and go and do the mitzvah. There is a very important caveat here. And that is, bitul only is really important. Bitul, nullification, only works when it belongs to you. This is the big difference between bitul and biur. Although we've been saying over and over again that midoraita one suffices, and I can just do bitul, but you can only do bitul when it belongs to you. From Hatzot, and potentially, rabbinically, even an hour before, the Chametz no longer belongs to you, which means you can no longer do bitul. Which means that which he's saying here, that if you've got enough time, you can go back or not, and if you don't have enough time to do both, then you can just do bitul, is only when you remember this whilst it's still in your possession. When the fifth hour hasn't kicked in yet. The end of the fifth, yeah? When it's still before 1 hour before Chatzot. So then you can still just do bitul. If, however, bitul is no longer applicable because it no longer belongs to you, because the time of Isur has kicked in, then actually many would say that you do need to go back and do biur. I just wanted to bring out this point, which is an important point. Okay. Good.
Can I just clarify, right? If you're running 5 minutes late and you haven't done I don't know, it took a long time to finish burning the chametz, and then you grab your muscle and you want to do the bitul, and you look at your watch and, that was 5 minutes ago. You're saying rabbinically you can no longer do it.
If it's past the time of biur chametz, of getting a disposal of chametz, then you can no longer do bitul. You're going to have to do biur then. You're going to have to do biur.
I didn't realize that.
Definitely.
But I mean, but you can still do it deraita, so shouldn't you try and do it at least to be able to do the deraita?
You mean if you're still within that hour before Chatzot, you mean?
That's what I mean, yeah.
Fine.
Often what happens is
yeah.
you try and burn it doesn't burn quickly, and then you're busy burning.
Fine. You could argue that. But the point is certainly true from Chatzot and onwards. Because then midoraita definitely doesn't belong to you.
Right.
And you can't do bitul, then you're going to have to do biur. Okay, let's now do, in the remaining 10 minutes which we have, let's do chapter Taf Mem Hey, Din Biur Chametz Ubo Gimel Seifim. We've touched on this a few points, let's quickly do this. So it says the Shulchan Aruch 445, the laws of the destruction of Chametz. Aleph. Keitzad Biur Chametz. This is a famous mahloket in the Mishnah and Pesachim. The Hachamim held that Biur Chametz does not have to be done just by burning. It can be done by any form of destruction. So what are the forms? Says the Shulchan Aruch, Sorfo, you can burn it, or Porero v'zoreh ruach, or you can crush it and crumble it and throw it into the air, Ozar kol hayam, or you can throw it into the sea. But you have to do an act of tashbitu, an act of destruction. Rabbi Yehuda held, however, that you have to burn it. He compared it to notar. Notar, a sacrifice which has been left beyond the time it was meant to be, then has to be burnt. And he compares the two and says, so too, Chametz, once the time of Isur kicks in, you have to burn it. But Shulchan Aruch does not hold that. He holds any of the other forms like the Hachamim. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Chametz kasher ben hayam mechatcho b'mhera. If it's stale, it's very hard, the bread. Then before you throw it into the sea, then make it into smaller pieces, so then the water will indeed break it down. Says the Rama, v'minhag lesorfo. The Rama for the Ashkenazim says that the general custom is that we burn it. And indeed, that's what the Ashkenazim generally try to do. They burn the Chametz. V'tov lesorfo bayom, dumya denotar So this is why in a regular year, or for us Faradim, we don't need to burn it. We can, as we've learned, we can just throw it down the toilet or pour detergent on it and make it inedible. That's all a form of destruction. As opposed to Ashkenazim will actually go out and make sure to do a burning to fulfill the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that they have to burn Chametz, you have to dispose of Chametz by actually burning it. The Rama adds in, it's a good custom to burn during the day, Dumya de notar shenesab bayom. Notar as well, in times of the temple, when you had a leftover sacrifice, they would burn that during the day. And so to make it comparable, you burn during the day. Really, you could burn at night after Bedikat Chametz. But it's a nice thing, we do it in the day as well. Also, it will remind you that you need to do bitul as well. Okay. But the Rama says, if you're concerned that a creature, a mouse or something is going to come and take it, if you leave it overnight, as we've seen, there's many concerns with mice in houses, right? So if there's a concern with that, then you're allowed to burn it at night, and that's fine. Main point is, there is a big mahloket here, Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Even according to the Rama, the main halakha is that you can dispose of chametz with the means of the Shulchan Aruch, but the minhag is developed. In the first instance, they do like Rabbi Yehuda and burn it. Why is this important to know? I remember during the year of COVID, the Ashkenazi Rabbanim came out here in London and they said, you don't need to go out and burn your chametz this year. You can just throw it down the toilet and that's fine. And indeed, that's what, for us, anyway, it's like that every year. Yeah, it's a nice thing. I go to burn the chametz. The Ben Ish Chai writes to do so. It's a nice thing. It's a nice minhag to do as well. But you don't have to, go crazy to go and burn your chametz. Says the Shulchan Aruch, halacha bet, ve'im netano le'eno Yehudi kodem sha'a shishit eno tzech levaer. If you gave all your chametz to a non-Jew before the time of prohibition kicked in, you don't need to do bi'ur chametz. Because you don't have any chametz. You've given it to him as a gift. But here the Mishnah Berurah points out, and all the Achronim write this, that you should always leave something. This is the point we touched on early on in the shul. You should leave at least a kazayit to do the mitzvah of bi'ur chametz, because it's a mitzvah to say. If you give all your to the non-Jew, you gave all your stuff to the non-Jew, then you could argue that I'm just giving it to him as a gift. It's not the mitzvah of bi'ur. I'm not actually doing an act of disposal, an act of destruction. I'm not destroying, I'm giving it to him. It's not an act of destruction. And therefore you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of tashbitus ono batechem, of getting rid and destroying chametz from your house. This is why if you want to give to your non-Jewish friends all the chametz, fine, but leave a kazait which you can dispose of yourself in the means which we have discussed. An interesting question is, can I give? So if you have a cleaner who comes into your house and doesn't sleep in your house and leaves, then of course, you give it to them and they leave and that's fine. But let's say I have a maid living with me, a non-Jewish maid living with me. And part of our agreement is that she eats from my food. So if the agreement is that she eats her own food, then of course you can give all your chametz to her before the time, and that's fine because it's just extra gift. But the question arises, if there's a contract, if there's an agreement between us that she eats from my food, is it considered hana'ah? Is it considered benefit for me that I give him or her, the maid, I give them the chametz before the time, which would then mean that I have less food to feed them on Pesach because of the chametz I gave them from before Pesach? You understand? Is that considered hana'ah? This is a practical question. Maids who live with people nowadays, which is common, and they're eating from the supplies of the house, and they have their own room, they keep their chametz there. Can I give them all the chametz before, and they use that and eat it during Pesach, and that then makes my, how much I have to give them over the course of Pesach less? Is that permissible or not? So, the Mishnah Berurah rules essentially that it's permissible because at the end of the day, unless you say to him or her, you say to the maid that this is your food for Pesach, then that's a problem. But if you just give them the food and then mimela automatically is that they have food, then that's fine. Of course, if they come knocking to your fridge during Pesach and say, I would like to have the Pesach cheese or the Pesach yogurt, the Pesach matzah, you can't decline them from that, right? Because you can't say, I've given you Chametz for Pesach. But if you just give them it, and the result of that will be that they're going to eat their own, that Chametz at the course of Pesach, and they won't come to you Pesach, and that's fine to do. Okay, the rest of the Shulchan Aruch talks about the coals which you burn the Chametz into. Those coals, if you burnt the Chametz before the time it became prohibited, then you're allowed to have those coals. You're allowed to have benefits from those coals because those coals aren't Chametz, and you burnt it at a time, you made it into coals at a time where you're allowed to have benefits. If, however, you only burnt the Chametz into coals after the time it became prohibited, and that was already Asur Bahana'ah, so actually you won't be able to make a fire on those coals because you'll be benefiting from something which came from Chametz, which was Asur Bahana'ah. Okay, fine. The rest of the Siman is not so okay. Now, next week we will see next week we're going to do one more chapter about Chametz in terms of finding Chametz during Pesach. What happens if you found Chametz during Pesach? And then we get to the big, really, really important chapter, one of the fundamental chapters of Pesach, 447, which talks all about ingredients of Pesach, mixtures on Pesach, bliot. Many, many important principles are within this chapter. So we're going to spend our time on Siman Taf Mem Zayin 447. We'll quickly do 446 next week, which talks about what happens if you find Chametz in your house. But then, B'ezrat Hashem, we will resume Taf Mem Zayin.